Hello again, everyone. This is James Nussbaumer, author of The Master of Everything, a story of mankind in the world of illusion we call life. Now we go into part 2 of the book called Searching for the Hand of Destiny, and we enter chapter 7, titled Growing Pains. A Zen master speaks to his students about a great warrior of ancient Japan who once marched out to meet the enemy with an army 1/10 the number of the opposition. The general's name was Nobunaga, and he said to himself, "I will win, I am sure." But his men had doubt. En route to the field of battle, Nobunaga paused to offer prayers at a wayside shrine. Then he told his prisoners, "Destiny holds us in her hand." From his pocket he took out a coin. "I will toss it. If heads comes up, we will win. If it be tails, then we must prepare for our death." He flung the coin skyward. It flashed in the sun's light and fell heads up. A roar of courage shook the inspired soldiers. Eager to fight, Nobunaga's men won their battle easily. No one can change the hand of destiny with the toss of a coin, the victorious warrior's aide told Nobunaga after the fighting was over. "Indeed, one cannot," Nobunaga replied, smiling. He held up the coin that he had tossed, which was double-headed. I thought that was a cute tale. Well, each of us has a destiny that is chartered beyond our own thinking. But the world we live in sends us in a multitude of directions. So the courses we pursue in life are not always of our own choosing. And we often work to achieve goals that do not reflect what we truly want. The individual who believes he is complete master of his own destiny exists solely in the eyes of his own ego. I began to idolize the Beatles at age 7 when I first saw them perform on the Ed Sullivan Show. Later, as a determined young boy to be all that I could be, I wanted to know more about Lucy in the Sky, and I fantasized about being on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. I yearned to be a part of the revolution and the evolution that they sang about. Their free spirit and free will struck me, and I wanted it too. Growing up in 1960s Ohio, I was the oldest of 6 children in a low-income Catholic family. My father worked as a welder at a local factory, and my mother was a registered nurse at a local hospital. My dream beyond rock and roll was to be a football hero at Notre Dame, but this was also the dream of all the other boys I played parochial league ball with. My desire felt to me that it was bigger than the others, so the dream continued for a while. I did pretty well and scored many touchdowns as a small halfback, and I was told that the other teams keyed on me each game. By the time I was a freshman at Central Catholic High School, though my size had not yet caught up with my desire, at the team's official weigh-in, I came up with the idea of placing a few weights into my pockets to portray a heavier me on the roster. The scale teetered at 96 pounds. I was very concerned about my weight and height if I were to earn a scholarship to play football for the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. I tried all the proven stretching gimmicks and sprinkled loads of wheat germ over every meal, but I just could not seem to grow. After my freshman season, I was forced by lack of pounds and inches to awaken from the dream of tearing up the turf at Notre Dame. I finished high school in a few more years with a slightly above average grades only because I didn't ever prepare for tests, and my physical form finally did mature. My parents had always been and still are devoted Catholics, and they expected the same from their 4 daughters and 2 sons. My grandparents, too, had occupied the same third-row seat every Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Mass at St. Barbara's. It was an old parish with generations of good Catholic families, with a cemetery behind the church for the members who passed along to a better place. At Sunday Mass, I would sit in confusion, bored with the sermons and readings and impatient with the kneeling, standing, and sitting. I was an altar boy and was often seen fidgeting and daydreaming of girls, football, music, and anything else other than my duties on the altar. Occasionally, I would get a nasty look with a signal from Father Dom when I was late ringing the consecration bell at the most boring part of the Mass. Of course, at that age, I didn't understand it. What I wanted to know about the most was the secret conversations Jesus had with the apostles. I figured there had to be parts left out of the fragments recorded in the Gospels, which I also suspected had to have been touched up a bit after all these years. I wondered what they really talked about while out for the day on Peter's fishing boat. How did they hang out together? What jokes did they tell one another? How did they talk about the local women? I always believed that Mary Magdalene was Jesus' wife, and I still do. I wanted to know more than the people who wrote the history books were willing to tell us. I guess it was during my high school days when I admitted to myself that God was not this old man with a white beard wearing a white robe sitting on a golden throne somewhere past the sun, who handed out favors to those who prayed the most. The theology classes seemed to not want to go into that sort of a thing. The study was more about making sense of the New and Old Testaments. The Exodus and the travels of Paul following Jesus' death did interest me, but I always wanted more. My doubts were not about God ever, but I doubted the experts who interpreted all these things and all these teachings. Why was I supposed to trust someone else's view of things? The only answer I could ever get was because the Bible says so. Everyone seemed afraid to put their own interpretation into the Holy Word. Don't get me wrong, my upbringing did give me a strong foundation for which I am grateful, and there were many teachers, nuns, and priests whom I admired. It was also nice to find out that Father Kaler, fresh out of the seminary when I was a high school senior, sporting his shoulder-length hair, was also a Beatles fan. He felt that even Jesus would have been listening to Let It Be and Hey Jude. I now hear it as a plus for the school that Father Kaler today is the school's principal, although I also heard that he is minus the hair. But I still wanted answers and that they just couldn't seem to commit to. Now, as I look back, I believe they must have had the same questions and also would have liked answers too. I started college at Kent State not knowing at all where I was heading, other than to parties. Quickly, I realized I wanted to put the books down for a while and get into the real world. As uncertain as I was and impatient for answers and growth, I knew one thing for sure, and that was I needed to earn money. The answers I was getting at the beer parties sounded good while listening to Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, but they weren't good enough for me. I needed to move on, so this is when I started looking at the sky, and I flew right to it. By 1975, I was the property of the United States Air Force. My girlfriend Lori, who months later became my wife, got to tag along with me. Compliments of the Air Force. How cool is this, is what I proudly felt. I found some answers and the truth about Vietnam fairly quickly. Many of my new airman friends were recently back from tours of duty in Vietnam, and the war was now over. I got to hear the war stories firsthand over beers at the NCO Club, which is the Non-Commissioned Officers Club. They were training me as though I might be sent there, but fortunately for me, no additional troops were being sent. The 1970s were pretty wild, but safe for me, even as an airman. The Air Force did take good care of me, and in 1978, Erin was born. As a young father with inspiration extending through me and into my gorgeous daughter, my responsibilities kept a lid on the wilder times. I needed to be serious and help make a clear path for Erin's future. Plus, the oath I had taken to die for my country if necessary held strong in my heart. I guess you could say I was the gung-ho type, and this excited me. I remember one night on a training session, a training exercise when the base was on alert, a few of us under the stars until sunrise. About a dozen of us were all gazing at the starry sky while we maintained our position at our C-141 aircraft. The exercise called for the arrival and departure of several aircraft throughout the night. This intensified our discussion about the cosmos and the mystery behind the universe. I've always had a keen connection and a curiosity regarding all that is visible and beyond in the sky. One of the guys said to me that it appeared as though I knew something that they didn't, as we all spoke and gazed in awe of the beauty of that particular night. I cannot say I knew something, but I always felt connected somehow to something. By the mid-1980s, the Air Force was behind me, and so was my marriage to Lori. We would both say later it had outgrown itself. Now I was a rookie in the financial services industry, training hard and making it as a broker. It was the yuppie years, which meant hippies were joining the business world, and rather than bell bottoms and tie-dyed shirts, the wave was three-piece suits and maybe some suspenders. I was making financial decisions and designing investment strategies for others as well as myself. This was now my place in the world, and I had a house and a fast car to keep me honest at working long hours. It was the thing to do, at least for me. As a business professional, that is who I would be to the world. The answers I discovered were called money and more money. Money was to solve all problems. I was living fast, having fun and success. However, one thing was wrong. It really did not feel right to me. Something was missing, but I bought some advice from a veteran in the industry who told me something will always seem to be missing. So I just worked harder, stayed with it, and was making a life for myself. My questionable Catholic faith remained with me in the form of all the Hail Marys that seemed to be embedded into my prayer system. Then my bachelorhood was interrupted by the beautiful auburn-haired Lori, who knocked me off my bar stool one evening and onto the dance floor. Yes, you heard that right, another Lori. In fact, she became Lori number two, as I was often teased in a fun-loving manner by friends and family who wholly supported my loving relationship with her. It wasn't long before the new Lori became my wife, and about 10 months later, the lovely auburn-haired Megan Rose was born into this world. I now felt I had the task to make a future for the two half-sisters, Erin and Megan. One thing for certain in my mind was that these two girls would be given the opportunity to share a life together as sisters of one family, regardless of their having different mothers. I was firm on this, and I needed to convince my ex-wife, Lori number one, Erin's mother, to cooperate. It all worked out well, though like any other family, we ran into a few minor complications and hassles along the way, but something always seemed to accommodate both sides of the split family. To this day, Erin and Megan are so close as two sisters could possibly be with their 7-year age difference. In fact, their resemblance to each other is simply lovely, even though both complain occasionally about the cowlick in their hairline, the same cowlick that I have lived with and passed on to me by my mother. As I write this, Erin is a school teacher with her own family, and Megan pursues law school. I remember one cold, clear winter night that the two girls, Lori number two and I, spent on ice skates at a neighborhood pond. A star-filled moonlight sky was the only witness to a conversation that Lori and I had about God, life, the cosmos, and our future together. I can still see the moon glistening into Lori's deep brown, beautiful eyes as we pondered our mortality, the future of the girls, and more. She looked lovingly into my eyes as we stood across from each other on our skates, with cold steam showing proof of our breath. But the loving look she gave me was that more of a friend than of a lover. In a light tone, she said to me, "I don't know what you are, Jim. I feel as though I can see through your eyes and directly into you. It's scary. What are you, honey?" She hugged me and skated off giggling like a child being mischievous. Lori sadly passed away only after a few years later and following a fight with cancer, where she was only 35 years old. The 21st century dawned before I knew it, and by this time I was pretty much established as a financial advisor. More and more my client base was made up of the affluent, and I was spending a lot of time in Clearwater, Florida, organizing and expanding my business practice into a branch office while enjoying warm winters, and my travel was extensive. I began rubbing elbows with the country's top advisors, learning their secrets and their ways of living the good life. They welcomed me and were always helpful. I noticed there was one common theme among these individuals, and it was that they all seemed to truly have a passion for their business before the money. It seemed to be their life or who they were. This was something I could not feel, and I struggled with a lost feeling of not belonging. I was playing a game of pretending to be something I was not. I felt like an actor, as if I were a piece of the puzzle, but of some other puzzle that didn't fit, or a game piece that was in the wrong box of a board game. Although my efforts did pay off financially, so I was able to taste the good life, I was fooling myself, though. I knew it was really not my good life I was tasting. It was the good life that the world painted a picture of. I felt no true rewards. By now, I was seriously involved with Dania, who I literally bumped into in an elevator while in Florida. Before long, we married, bringing another daughter into the world. Casey May sports the same cowlick, by the way, as her two beautiful half-sisters, father, and grandmother. Casey is extremely precious and loving, but requires special care due to her learning disabilities and the fact that she cannot speak. Despite her special needs, Casey May seems to have an inner joy and a peace within herself that just attracts many people. It's as though she has something we all want. Now a lovely young lady, she continues with various therapy programs, and her amazing progress sparks a light of hope in all of us who love her dearly. I began to get nervous about the economy and stock markets bouncing around and crumbling. My marriage began crumbling as well, and Dania and I separated, placing more pressure on me, which I was not handling very well at all. I began losing clients right and left, and my small self-built destiny was in the gutter. I was openly admitting how much I hated the business and myself for allowing it to consume me for so many years of my life, all for the money, the house on the lake, the operation in Florida, and the other things money can buy. And now back in divorce court, squabbling over who gets what. I was lost with no money to bail me out. However, this thinking told me to dig in harder than I ever had before, so I worked diligently to make things happen and regain financial security. I began straining my mind for endless hours, trying to devise some kind of new strategy to drum up business. But I had to hurry because I was running out of money fast, and this drumming up plan was also costing me money. I was making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Maybe, just maybe, if I do some of this and a little of that, I can make something kick in, went my thought process 24 hours a day. I was exhausted and beat up. This was not good for my emotional condition, and I knew help was needed as I began to mortgage the house and take out loans that I had no confidence I'd be able to repay. I was looking for answers, and I wanted them fast. I read all of the motivational books recommended by the high achievers in my industry and listened to the many recordings of the masters themselves. I went to seminars on change, optimism, dealing with pain and healing, and you name it, and nothing was able to save me. Something kept pushing me to search further and not give up hope. My boat was sinking fast, and I needed rescue. While browsing the self-help section in a bookstore in Port Richey, Florida, I stumbled upon a book by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer called Your Erroneous Zones. I connected immediately as I stood there in the store paging through it. His message was for me, I told myself. In the weeks and months ahead, I eventually purchased every one of his many books and absorbed every word as though it was intended specifically for me. Over time, I became a huge fan of Dr. Dyer and appreciated the fact that at one point in his own life, he had experienced a similar confusion and he was able to discover the answer. Not only did I read and study all of his material, but also that of the others Dr. Dyer had recommended. I was hearing them all loud and clear, but I still could not seem to budge. They were proving to me that the light was in the window, but I just could not get the window shade up that was obscuring my light. I was afraid and began more and more to force things and push everything, including my thinking. As I read Wayne Dyer and many of the other writers I respected, I often noticed that on occasion they referenced a publication called A Course in Miracles. What is this Course in Miracles? I would often ask myself, and I'd let it twirl in the back of my mind. I would, of course, tell myself that I needed to check this out. One of these days, I would say. And it was totally unlike me to ever procrastinate on researching and seeking out this publication. But this is what happened. I had procrastinated. I had put the Course in Miracles that I knew nothing about. I had put the research of A Course in Miracles on the back burner, so to speak. Again and again, I would hear mention of this publication, and I did nothing. By this time, my mind was so flooded with panic and turmoil that frustration was all I was about each minute of every day. In an effort to create capital to keep my business alive, I acted alone in crossing an illegal line within the financial services industry. I borrowed money from my clients' accounts with the full intention of paying it back before anyone was the wiser. My thought system saw a way to fix everything through various investments that had failed once before, but now were on the rise. A sure thing, I told myself. You know the rest of the story. The plan failed. I hit rock bottom. I was so busy searching for the hand of my own destiny where all along, all I had to do was lift the window shade and let the light in. Thank you, everyone. In the next session, we will proceed to chapter 8. I hope you will join us there. Thank you.